Hello, friends! On July 20th, 1969, the lunar module of Apollo 11 touched down on the moon. Inside were astronauts Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin. After landing, Armstrong tried to open the hatch and climb down onto the lunar surface. It wasn't easy because of the pressure inside the module, but after a brief struggle, he finally managed to open it. As he carefully stepped out in his bulky spacesuit, the narrow exit caused him to bump the top of the spacecraft. A small but critical piece broke off. Neither astronaut realized what had happened. With no atmosphere on the moon, sound couldn't travel, so they never heard the impact. That broken piece was the ascent engine arming switch. Without it, the lunar module would never be able to lift off again, leaving them stranded on the moon forever. Completely unaware of the danger, Neil Armstrong stepped onto the lunar surface and became the first human in history to walk on the moon. His unforgettable words echoed around the world. One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. But did it really happen? More than 50 years later, millions of people still believe humans never landed on the moon. Many claim the entire Apollo 11 mission was staged, filmed on Earth, and presented to the world as a giant deception. If there's no air on the moon, then why does the American flag appear to wave? What's the real truth? Let's uncover the full story in today's documentary. The real reason behind the Apollo 11 mission was a global rivalry. It all began during the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union. Both nations were locked in an intense space race, each determined to prove its technological superiority. In 1957, the Soviet Union shocked the world by launching Sputnik, the first artificial satellite to orbit Earth. America suddenly found itself falling behind. Just months later, the United States launched its own satellite, hoping to catch up. But in 1961, another major setback arrived. Soviet cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin became the first human ever to travel into space. Once again, the Soviet Union had reached a historic milestone before America. Only a week later, President John F. Kennedy wrote to his vice president asking one crucial question. How could America beat the Soviets? He wanted a bold mission that would produce dramatic results and restore America's lead in space. The answer soon became clear. The next great achievement would be landing a human on the moon. On May 25, 1961, Kennedy made a promise to the world. Before the decade ended, America would land a man on the moon and return him safely to Earth. At the time, many people thought the promise was impossible. There were no smartphones, no internet, no GPS, computers were slow and extremely limited. Yet America committed billions of dollars to make the impossible become reality. Over the next several years, NASA focused almost every resource on achieving that single goal. The testing phase began almost immediately. NASA first focused on the powerful rockets that would lift the spacecraft off Earth. Next came the heat shields, designed to survive the extreme temperatures of re-entry. Then engineers tested the propulsion systems that would power the journey through space. Between 1963 and 1967, numerous unmanned missions were launched. These flights carried no astronauts. Their only purpose was to test the technology and uncover every possible weakness. In early 1967, NASA prepared for its first manned Apollo mission. It was called Apollo 1. But before the mission could even leave the ground, tragedy struck. During a routine launch rehearsal, a fire erupted inside the command capsule. The cabin filled with flames within seconds. All three astronauts lost their lives. It was one of the darkest moments in NASA's history. Instead of giving up, NASA carefully investigated every mistake, redesigned the spacecraft, and continued testing. Apollo 4, Apollo 5, and Apollo 6 all flew without astronauts, proving that the upgraded systems were ready. Then, in October 1968, Apollo 7 successfully carried astronauts into Earth orbit. Just 2 months later, Apollo 8 became the first mission to carry humans around the moon. In March 1969, Apollo 9 tested the lunar module in space for the very first time. Then came Apollo 10. It was the final dress rehearsal. The crew performed nearly every step of the moon mission, except the landing itself. Mission after mission, taste after taste, NASA eliminated every major risk. Finally, on July 16, 1969, Apollo 11 lifted off on the mission that would change human history forever. 3 astronauts were chosen for this historic mission. Commander Neil Armstrong would lead the flight. Michael Collins would pilot the command module, and Edwin Buzz Aldrin would pilot the lunar module. Today, almost everyone remembers Armstrong and Aldrin, but Michael Collins is often forgotten. The reason is simple. He never walked on the moon. The Apollo 11 spacecraft had 3 major sections: the command module, the service module, and the lunar module. Together, the command and service modules remained in lunar orbit. Only the lunar module would descend to the moon. After completing the mission, it would launch back into orbit and dock with the command module for the journey home. The entire spacecraft was launched aboard the mighty Saturn V rocket. Before liftoff, it was fueled with nearly 1 million gallons of kerosene, liquid oxygen, and liquid hydrogen. Weighing nearly 3 million kilograms, it remains one of the most powerful rockets ever built. In less than 10 minutes, Apollo 11 reached Earth orbit. The crew completed several orbits while Mission Control carefully checked every system. Once everything was confirmed, they received the final command. It was time for trans-lunar injection. The third stage of the Saturn V ignited once more, pushing the spacecraft out of Earth's orbit and toward the moon. The journey would take several days. During the flight, the astronauts ate, slept, performed routine checks, and photographed both their spacecraft and the breathtaking view of space. After traveling nearly 400,000 kilometers, Apollo 11 finally entered lunar orbit. Once Apollo 11 entered lunar orbit, the spacecraft separated into 2 sections. Michael Collins remained inside the command module known as Columbia. Meanwhile, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin climbed into the lunar module, Eagle. Their mission was clear. Only Eagle would descend to the lunar surface. Columbia would continue circling the moon, waiting for their return. This is why only Armstrong and Aldrin became the first humans to walk on the moon. But Michael Collins had an equally critical responsibility. Without him waiting in orbit, there would be no way home. As Eagle began its descent, everything appeared to be going according to plan. Then suddenly, warning alarms flashed across the guidance computer. Alarm 1201, then alarm 1202. Neither Armstrong nor Aldrin knew exactly what they meant. They immediately contacted Mission Control. The response came back without hesitation. "Your go. Continue the landing." Later, engineers discovered the alarms were caused by an overloaded guidance computer. Fortunately, the computer had been designed to ignore non-essential tasks and keep the landing program running. As Eagle descended closer to the surface, the onboard computer aimed for an area covered with large boulders. Armstrong quickly realized it wasn't safe. He switched from automatic guidance to manual control. Carefully flying the lunar module himself, he searched for a safer landing site. Every second burned precious fuel. Every decision could mean success or disaster. As Eagle continued its descent, the tension inside Mission Control reached its peak. Every second mattered. Every drop of fuel counted. Buzz Aldrin checked the fuel gauge. Only 5% remained. Mission Control immediately began the countdown. First came the 60-second call, then the 30-second call. If the fuel ran out before landing, the mission would have to be aborted. Armstrong stayed focused. Ignoring the pressure, he guided Eagle toward the safer landing site. Finally, with only seconds of fuel remaining, a calm voice came over the radio. "Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed." Mission Control erupted in celebration. One of humanity's greatest dreams had just become reality. A short time later, Neil Armstrong suited up and slowly opened the hatch. He carefully climbed down the ladder, placed one foot onto the lunar surface, and made history. His first words would be remembered forever. One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. An estimated 650 million people around the world watched the moment live on television. Soon after, Buzz Aldrin joined Armstrong on the moon. For the next 2.5 hours, the astronauts explored the surface. They collected rock and soil samples, captured historic photographs, and installed scientific instruments that would continue sending valuable data back to Earth long after they had left. The moon landing wasn't just a political victory. It was also one of the greatest scientific missions ever undertaken. Although the Cold War played a major role in this mission, Apollo 11 was never just about politics. The astronauts also carried out several important scientific experiments. They placed a television camera on the lunar surface, allowing people on Earth to witness the mission. They installed instruments to measure the solar wind. Another experiment used laser reflectors, making it possible to calculate the exact distance between the Earth and the Moon with remarkable precision. They also deployed a passive seismometer to detect moonquakes beneath the lunar surface. Before leaving, Armstrong and Aldrin collected nearly 23 kilograms of lunar rocks and dust for scientific research. They planted the American flag and left behind a plaque carrying a message from the people of Earth. The plan was to remain on the Moon for about 21 hours. After that, the lunar module had to launch again and rendezvous with Michael Collins in lunar orbit. Everything depended on the ascent engine. But when the astronauts returned inside the lunar module, they discovered something alarming. The switch needed to start the ascent engine had broken off. It was the same piece Armstrong had accidentally damaged while climbing out. Without that switch, there would be no liftoff, no rendezvous, and no return to Earth. Mission Control searched desperately for a solution. Then Buzz Aldrin noticed the ballpoint pen in his pocket. He carefully inserted the pen into the broken switch opening, completing the electrical circuit by hand. It worked. The ascent engine roared to life. The lunar module lifted off from the Moon, docked safely with Columbia, and the three astronauts finally began their long journey back to Earth. The journey home was far from over. To return safely, the command module had to separate from the service module before entering Earth's atmosphere. The service module was designed to burn up during re-entry, but there was one serious concern. If it broke apart too close to the command module, the debris could collide with the astronauts' capsule. To prevent this, the service module was equipped with thrusters to push it safely away. But during the return journey, those thrusters failed. The astronauts could do nothing but watch as pieces of the service module drifted around them. For a few terrifying moments, no one knew whether the flying debris would strike the command module. Miraculously, none of the fragments made contact. The spacecraft remained intact. The danger was so real that President Richard Nixon had already prepared an emergency speech in case the astronauts never returned. Fortunately, it was never needed. The command module safely entered Earth's atmosphere, its parachutes deployed exactly as planned. Moments later, the capsule splashed down into the Pacific Ocean. Rescue teams quickly reached the astronauts and brought them safely aboard. Against incredible odds, Apollo 11 had completed one of the greatest missions in human history. Although the mission faced unexpected problems at nearly every stage, the courage, skill, and determination of the crew turned every crisis into a historic success. After returning to Earth, the astronauts spent 2 weeks in quarantine. Scientists wanted to make absolutely sure they hadn't brought back any unknown microorganisms from the Moon. Thankfully, no such danger existed. Apollo 11 had not only fulfilled a dream, it had changed human history forever.
Everyone has a story.
What's yours?
Share it in the comments.
Your story could become our next episode. Subscribe to Believe and Achieve. Let's inspire the world together.